Coming up, we're going to continue our DTVC Extra series looking at the Kickboxer franchise with movies 3, 4, and 5. And then in terms of what we've got on tap for next week on the podcast, Rich Haas from DTV Digest is going to be stopping by. We're going to be recording with him soon, looking at some short films. So he's curated a great list of short films for us. Give you a hint, one of the ones that he's picked is Dirty Laundry, the Punisher short with Thomas Jane. So we'll be looking at those there. And then also, Ty from Comeuppance is going to be on. We're going to be recording in the near future as well to kind of continue our series of looking at, 2 movies an episode kind of deal. We're going to be looking at Hunting Games with CT. So we're bringing CT back after the fun that we had with him from Most Dangerous Game. And then American Violence, a film with Gronk, Rob Gronkowski. So that's going to be fun. We're going to probably a little bit of a Massachusetts mayhem thing going on here. We've got CT from Eastern Mass, and then Gronk, who played with the Patriots, who's a bit of a hero in the Massachusetts area. So so that ought to be fun there. So again, we'll be recording those in the near future. So I'm not sure. Again, you never know. Even me talking about it is a little bit presumptuous, right? Because you just never know if you don't have the episodes in the can yet. What's exactly going to happen. But I'm assuming between each of them, we should be able to get one of those 2 recorded. And who knows? By the time this episode goes on, I may have already recorded with Rich, so we might be all set there. But looking forward to those 2 episodes. But that's coming in the next couple weeks, and then also, of course, 2 weeks from today, we're going to wrap up that Kickboxer series by looking at the 2 reboots there. So that ought to be interesting as well. In terms of the blog, so I finally director, producer, and actor Nathan Hill had reached out to me about reviewing his newest film, Lady Terror, which is slightly based off the movie Blown Away. I remember that one with the 2 Corys in it, which I reviewed some time ago. So he'd asked me to review that for him, and I kind of got lost in the shuffle with how busy with everything I've been doing. But it has been watched. It is in the can. So I'll probably get that review up on Thursday of this week. And I'm going to try my best. I don't know if I'll be able to get an indie film up every Thursday going forward, but at least, hopefully this Thursday we'll have that. And then on Saturday, for our regular review, I finally watched Come Out Fighting, the newest Dolph film. So by cable company, finally dropped the price down to $5.99, so it qualified for the dollar rental. I know the ongoing saga with how much Matt's going to be paying for his movies that he rents. But originally I'd had Astro planned in that spot, the Gary Daniels film, because I wanted to get more Gary Daniels up. And I have been kind of pushing to watch more movies lately, so I've watched quite a few in the past few days. So I'm trying to kind of keep that pace of maybe play fewer video games on my phone and do more movie watching, more reviewing, all of that kind of thing. So if that's the case, I might get Repeater in. So that's the newest Gary Daniels one that's available on Tubi. The only reason why I'd prefer to do Come Out Fighting before Repeater, even though I wanted to get more Daniels because it kind of keep him a little bit caught up with Dolph. He's not ever going to fully catch up with him, but make it so Dolph isn't completely lapping him. But Michael Jai White is also in Come Out Fighting, and I do need to get more Michael Jai White up as well. So to be able to get more Michael Jai White up while continuing the process with Dolph, that would be good. So then maybe Repeater will come in 2 weeks time. So we'll see. Other ones that we have on tap, Hard Hunted. So kind of finishing up, kind of keep moving on that Sedaris project, trying to get all the Sedaris films up there. Probably finally get to do Hard Target 2 at some point. I also have Executive Target, the PM flick with Michael Madsen. I might flip that one with Scott Adkins' Hard Target 2. I'm not sure. But yeah, so those are some ones we've got coming. But the other ones, I'm looking to watch in the near future. I mean, VFW is one that's been in the been on my watch list for a while now. Hopefully we'll get that one in soon. So so that to review list, it might change a little bit. But you can always go to Letterboxd and look at upcoming reviews watch to see what we've got coming in the near future. And of course, if you've got any requests or anything that you want to see, let me know. Now, the other thing, of course, is that means if we do Come Out Fighting as the next Dolph film, that means we've got 4 Got 10 on tap to be his 70th film on the site. And I mean, 4 Got 10 does not feel like a great Dolph 70th flick. So I was like, maybe I should make an executive decision and put something else in there. One idea I had was Expendables 3, because I've done the first 2 Expendables films, but I haven't done 3. There was a podcast episode. If you go back in the archives, Jamie and I did a podcast episode on 3, but I've never actually reviewed it on the site despite doing the other 2. the only thing is, like, how great of a Dolph movie is that one, right? So I don't know. It might just end up being Forget Tenna. That's his 70th movie, and that's what it is, So anyway, so that's but we're that close to getting Dolph to 70 films on the site, which is going to be huge. Why not? I don't know how huge, right? With my site, and it's just my but I mean, to get 70 movies, that's big. He's the only actor on the site who has more movies than he's had years on the planet. So Gary Daniels is getting there. He's getting close on that. But other than him, Dolph, it's just Dolph. So yeah, quite a run that he's had on the DTVC, and still having, right. We've still got movies that are coming up for him. It'll be interesting to see what he does in the new Aquaman movie, because I think it's just kind of fun that he's in those movies, especially after having done The Punisher. So yeah, so we'll kind of see what happens there. But it's going to be an interesting conundrum, right, to see if we how that ends up working out for him. But keep watching this space, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, why don't we get into the old theme song here, and then we will start off with Kickboxer 3. All right, we are back, and we are looking at Kickboxer 3, The Art of War. So, I don't know that I would say, I was trying to decide if this is like the least favorite of mine. I think going into it, I was thinking that 5 might have been, in the running for worse than this one. But actually, having seen 3, 4, and 5 again, they kind of flipped a bit. So I don't want to, walk all over my my upcoming, and later on in this podcast when we talk about number 5. But this is an interesting movie, right? I think that's probably the best way we can say. So Albert Pyun steps away from directing on this one, right? So he directed part 2. I think he said it was scheduling conflict that prevented him from doing this one. So what we have in this one is we've got Sasha Mitchell is back as David Sloan. Dennis Chan is back as Sian, as his trainer. They're going to Brazil to do an exhibition to make some money, and also to fight a champion there who is played by Ian Jacklin, right? So we replace one PM mainstay in part 2 with Vince Murdocco. Replace it with another PM mainstay with Ian Jacklin, right? And so of course Vince had a more robust part. Ian Jacklin's just here to fight a few times. We don't really get much more beyond that with him. But anyway, so while they're there, they meet a couple of for lack of a better term, street urchins, I guess. A young man who steals their camera, and a young girl who's with him, his sister. And Sloan and Xian, they take to the young kids and try to help them out. At the same time, we've got a baddie. The character's name is Lane, played by Richard Komar. He is essentially a low-rent, evil Joe Izuzu. That's probably the best way to describe him as a baddie. And of all the Kickboxer baddies, which of course it's mostly Tong Po, right, is our Kickboxer baddie. Though we get when we get into number 5, right, we get one of my favorites. We get James Ryan, who you may remember from Space Mutiny, right, as the guy who doesn't want anybody confusing freedom and treason, right, if you recall. But also from Kill Again, all kinds of stuff. So we'll get into James Ryan here in a little bit. But anyway, so we're getting away from Tong Po, and we've got our low-rent Joe Izuzu as the baddie here. And the low-rent Joe Izuzu as the baddie, not only is he the manager for Ian Jacklin as the fighter, but also he runs his own white slavery ring where he just takes young girls off the street and pushes them into prostitution. And unfortunately, right, we have a young daughter, the young sister of the boy that steals the camera. She is a target of this low-rent Joe Izuzu, and he kidnaps her. And then of course, so now we've got like kind of a detective thing, which it's a detective story in the sense that like we know who the baddie is, but Sloane and Xian don't know who the baddie is, and they've got to figure it out, for me, that's always the worst kind of detective story. The only time it ever works really well, maybe there's some other exceptions, but it seems like Columbo's the best way that it works, right? Because we know who the killer is at the beginning of Columbo, and then Columbo's got to figure it out as the episode goes on, but it's always kind of fun to watch him figure it out as we're watching it. So I guess that's the only exception. This is no Columbo, right? This does not play out as well as Columbo. We get like a couple of fights with Mitchell, but it's mostly like him beating people up in the streets. And then eventually he gets guns and he's like going out to raid some houses and stuff like that with Dennis Chan. Eventually, what happens is that the baddie gets wise to him, captures him, and makes him do what he calls alternative training, right? Which essentially is just trying to run him ragged so he's too tired to fight Ian Jacklin at the end. Which, we know Sasha Mitchell, he's gonna be up for the fight no matter what, and of course he is up for the fight, and that's the end of it. We think that's the end of it, and then of course they have one last bit where they go confront the low-rent Joe Izuzu in his house, beat the crap out of him, and free all the ladies. So all is happily ever after, right? That's the end of it. It is definitely early '90s direct-to-video, right? I mean, it's got that feel to it. It has all of that going for it. I mean, again, as a sequel, as a kickboxing sequel, it feels a little sauteed in wrong sauce because again, it's just like, what are we doing here? It's not a kickboxer movie as much as it's like a detective, kind of actioner kind of thing. I guess that's maybe the best way to describe it. So it feels a little sauteed in wrong sauce in that sense. One thing that's interesting is Sasha Mitchell, who felt like he was older than his years in Part 2, feels younger in this one, and I don't know why that is. It's the way that they have his character look. He looks a little bit younger, so that's one interesting change there. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. This one definitely felt like I was getting through it. If that's the best way to describe it. Like I was like, okay, I gotta, and it was one of those things too where you're like, okay, it feels like they're wrapping this up here, but there's still like 45 minutes left. What are they going to do for the other 45 minutes? And it just kind of carries on. And I think that's the problem whenever you have some kind of a detective thing, you have to have red herrings. We have a red herring in this. It's Lane, or the low-rent Joe Izuzu's partner, right? So we referred to this when, if you haven't heard the Righteous Kill episode of Ty and Brett's podcast, we refer to this as Martin Bomb Pouting. Martin Bomb Padding. Sorry about getting my A's mixed up here. Martin Bomb Padding, but the idea is that, right, you've got your red herring. In that case, in Righteous Kill, it was Martin Baum, and but that person that we think could be it, but isn't it? And it really is just there to sort of pad the film out and give us some more time. I mean, this movie, I use this expression a lot, that if there was a Kickboxer syndicated TV show, this would be a perfect 43-minute episode of a Kickboxer TV show. I think there was plenty of material for just that, and it would have been okay. An hour and a half long movie, it gets a little tedious at points. So there's that there. The fight at the end with Jacklin and Sasha Mitchell isn't bad. It's pretty good. I think maybe you would have liked a little bit more out of that fight, just because, it kind of devolves into this absolute craziness where like refs are getting thrown out of the ring, people are getting punched out of the ring, knocked out of the ring. It's like kind of all over the place. The low-rent Joe Izuzu is preventing the ringman from ringing the bell because he wants him to just keep fighting, and Ian Jacklin, of course, is he's cheating all over the place, with elbows and groin shots. Sasha Mitchell takes a particularly rough groin shot, and I would say, myself, obviously, as a male myself who's been hit in the groin, I know one doesn't recover that quickly from it. But also, I remember at a UFC event, a guy was accidentally struck in the groin. I think the guy was trying to kick him in the leg and missed and caught him right square in the groin. And that guy was out. He was done. He was just lying there in pain. So taking a groin strike of the kind that Ian Jacklin gives him here, and again, I'm not saying that these fights need to all have the most, spectacular verisimilitude, but I would have liked to have seen Sasha Mitchell, in a little bit more pain for a little bit longer than he was. He just it was almost like it never happened. It was just like, oh, it was a cheap shot, but that's it. So that was, an interesting thing there. But again, that's Ian Jacklin's character. He's just he's the baddie, and he's cheating. He's supposed to be Argentinian, but he's extremely, SoCal, the whole way. But I think that is something, that's one of the problems with this that we don't get in the previous film in part 2 where we've got Tong Po when we bring Tong Po back. Because, yes, there's a 2-part baddie situation where you've got Tong Po and then you've got Cary Tagawa as his manager, and they're both equally baddie. Tong Po is enough of a baddie that he can manage it, and we don't really need to develop Tong Po too much because we've got enough of him from the previous film. With this, it was just like, oh, here's this Ian Jacklin guy that's just going to fight Sasha Mitchell, but really most of the baddie developmental work is being done with the Joe Izuzu guy. So that also is an interesting decision that they made there to not use a lot of Jacklin. And it might be because in 92, as an actor, Jacklin wasn't strong enough to do what they wanted him to. I don't know how great of an actor he needed to be to just be a baddie here, but, either way. And again, the fight scene could have been a little bit better. I mean, I think they just had so much stuff going on that they just kind of crammed that fight in at the end. So, yeah, so that's kind of it there. I was trying to think if there's anything else. One interesting thing was kind of separate from the movie itself was I was on IMDb looking up just some stuff about the film, and I noticed that a user list had this in it, and the user list was movies that aired on UPN 38 WSBK April 1st through the 29th of 2001. So that would have been me turning 22. I turned 22 on April 1st of 2001, and of course I would have still been at the University of Maine, so I don't know if I would. I think we did actually get WSBK up there. I can't remember. But anyway, so WSBK, just to give you a sense, growing up where I did, just north of Boston, WSBK was an independent station in Boston before it was bought. I don't know how that worked, where it was affiliated with UPN. But before that, it was independent. And on weeknights that they weren't showing Red Sox or Bruins games, they would have what they called the movie loft, and they would show movies every night. So once they became affiliated with UPN, then they were showing things like whatever UPN was showing, right? Shasta McNasty, the Dilbert cartoon, stuff like that. Moesha, right, with Brandy and Martin. I think was Martin UPN. I can't remember, but definitely Moesha was. But yeah, whatever UPN was showing at that time. Remember the new Love Boat? They had a new Love Boat with Robert Urich as the captain. But I guess maybe. So in that sense, because they weren't showing movies every day like that or every night like that, I guess if I'm trying to remember it right, they must have been showing them like on weekends and things like that. But anyway, somebody had created a list of movies which I don't even know how they would have figured out what movies were shown on UPN 38 at that time, during that. But I decided to take a look at the list and see if there's anything cool in there for us. And definitely some interesting ones. American Cyborg Steel Warrior comes up as one on there, which really interesting one. Rutger Hauer film Crossworlds is one that was on there. For our Donald Sutherland fans out there, Benefit of the Doubt from '93 was shown in there. Chain of Command, right? The Michael Dudikoff film. So you got to love that. That would have been on there. Yeah, I don't know if I would have seen any of these that came up, but it's just kind of interesting to look back and kind of see what some of them were. Some of them were interesting, like a Cage Seduction, a.k.a. Against Their Will. Judith Light movie with Stacy Keach. I think that must have been a Lifetime movie, but they make it look like it's like a Caged Heat kind of film. Can you imagine Judith Light in a Caged Heat movie? Like, that just seems so ridiculous. Same thing, there's another one called Prison of Secrets that had Stephanie Zimbalist and Finola Hughes. Again, imagining them in like a Caged Heat kind of movie just seems really, really interesting. We had Jim Belushi in Separate Lives with Linda Hamilton. So that's one of the interesting things about Jim Belushi's career, right, in the 90s, was that he did erotic thriller style neo-noirs, and that was one of the ones that he did, was Separate Lives. So some interesting stuff that was on WSBK in their April of 2001, but one of them on there was Kickboxer 3, The Art of War. So that wasn't how I saw it. I believe I saw it originally on Spike. It was another one that was on, I think, all of the Kickboxers that weren't, other than part 1, and then the 2 reboots I think I saw on Spike. I don't remember. Yeah, I think that's kind of, but that's pretty sure that's how I saw this. So that's there. Yeah, and I guess a couple other notes about this film, just personal notes. So from a sartorial standpoint, at the end scene when they confront the low rent Joe Izuzu, the pants that I really just popped my pee on pants there. The pants that Sasha Mitchell is wearing are so fantastic. They are just total like Zubaz, like whatever, just beautiful. And I think for me, I think they would be second only to Van Damme's thong tank top in the first movie in terms of outfits in this film. Just beautiful, beautiful pants. And I don't even know, I guess, I think like there are companies that are selling pants like these again, and I don't know if it's like they're an irony thing or if people actually really like wearing them again, but yeah, those pants are back in, which is really interesting. So there's that piece there, which it might be the best part of the movie are Sasha Mitchell's pants in that last scene. They're just absolutely fantastic. Other than, of course, the beautiful landscapes that we get of Rio in the film. And then another piece is we get almost Chekhov's capoeira, but it's not Chekhov's capoeira. It's almost like we get a scene where David Sloan, where Sasha Mitchell and Dennis Chan are walking around Rio, and they see some people practicing capoeira, and Chan gives them an explanation. Oh, when slaves were brought to Brazil, they couldn't practice martial arts, so they pretended that they were dancing. That's where capoeira looks like it's dancing when it's really a martial art. And so we're learning it, we're seeing people doing it. And I was thinking that what was going to happen, right, was that someone was going to train him on capoeira, and he was going to use some capoeira moves to defeat Ian Jacklin. That's what I thought was going to happen. Or it might have been even a little bit more like the first movie, right, where remember when Eric Sloan goes to Thailand and he gets beaten by Tong Po because he doesn't understand the differences between Muay Thai fighting and kickboxing, right? He thinks they're the same thing, and of course there's different strikes that you can do in Muay Thai that you can't do in kickboxing. So then Van Damme has to learn Muay Thai, right? The actual art of Muay Thai to be able to defeat Tong Po. And that might have been it, that's another idea that I had, was that maybe, or another thought that, maybe like Ian Jacklin's character would do some capoeira. But no, there's no use of it later on in the film. And it is kind of that Chekhov's gun idea, right? That like, you can't, if you show us capoeira in the early part of the movie, there's got to be a purpose for it beyond just showing us what it is, right? It's got to be used later on in the film. Otherwise, what's the point of showing it to us? And I mean, they even had the banana way and all of that stuff going on there. So, yeah, that part was, I don't know. And I understand it to some extent. I mean, I don't understand what they were going for with it. So, I know from my own experience, and I think I'd mentioned this on a podcast recently where I had Will from Exploding Helicopter on, where in my second novel, A Girl and a Gun, the main character is friends with an NFL football player. They went to college together, and he befriended him in college. And there's a scene where he's helping that NFL player is transitioning out. He's wanting to retire from football and get into broadcasting. And so he's helping him out. He's in a hotel room with him, chatting over, going over like some plays and stuff. And league officials show up at the hotel room so he can take a piss test for his for steroid test. And I put that scene in the book because I wanted to show how invasive, drug testing is, right? That if you were, yes, we need it, right? Because we want to know the athletes are clean, but it is invasive, right? The fact that just they could show up at any time. And the main, that character, the football player, talks about, having them show up at his daughter's birthday party and do that, all of those kinds of things. And I was trying to show it as a reason why he wanted to leave the league, right? Like why he was tired of the NFL, he was tired of doing all of this stuff, and he was ready to hang it up and move on to his next chapter in his life. But I realized after when I read it, and, from people reading it, there's an idea that if somebody's taking a steroid test, that it's going to have an impact later on in the book. That it wasn't, my idea was that the steroid test was in and of itself, it was important as a developmental tool. But no, for everybody else's mindset, there was like a Chekhov's drug test, right? And in most movies, most TV shows, books, whatever, when somebody takes a drug test, it usually comes back to bite them later on in the road. So I think it's kind of the same thing, right? If you're showing people doing a different style of fighting and you're making a big issue about showing this other style of fighting, in an action film that involves fighting, the character should be learning how to do that fighting style and using it at some point. Otherwise, there's no point in showing it. So there's that piece there. And then the capoeira thing also had kind of a personal thing for me. When I first met my wife, Jen, when we first met in person here in Philadelphia, we were here for, I spent a few days here with her, and we were sitting in Rittenhouse Square. It was my first time going to Rittenhouse Square. Which is, if you haven't been to Philadelphia, it's a really nice park here in kind of the western part of Center City. So it was my first time being there, and I was sitting there with her, and we were kind of people watching, kind of joking around. And there was a group of hipsters that were doing capoeira, and so one of them had the instrument. There was like kind of like the little stringed instrument that they were playing, and then the other two were kind of doing the capoeira, and it was nowhere near as great as what you were seeing in Kickboxer 2, or Kickboxer 3 rather. But it was just kind of funny to see hipsters doing that. Another hipster showed up with a fixed gear bike. I was waiting to hear them talk about like their vegan chili recipes or something like that. But it was perfect hipster. And so whenever I see capoeira in a movie, I always think of that experience there. So I don't always get to Rittenhouse that much. There always seems to be stuff going on there and everything. But yeah. So it is really nice. It's a really nice area to walk through. It's nice to kind of sit on the benches there and all of that. So that's kind of my thing with capoeira. But overall, I think I don't know if I was going to rank these. If I was going to make a letterbox list and rank all these, this might be. So not counting the reboots, right? Because when we get into the reboots later, they're kind of their own thing. But I think out of these 5 movies, this one might be the lowest one for me. And when we get into number 5, I'll kind of get into a little bit more about why that is. But yeah, I think I think we've got enough. I don't know how much more I can chat about with this, but I do like the idea. There should have been, and I'll talk about this when we get into the 5th one. What they could have done with Kickboxer after number 5, and I think the idea of a syndicated show could have worked, a syndicated Kickboxer show. And this movie would have been perfect as one episode in a Kickboxer show. I don't think it just didn't have enough for a full episode. And yeah, that's kind of it. It's definitely on the nondescript side when it comes to these movies. But yeah, what we'll do is we'll take another break here and then we'll come back and we'll look at Kickboxer 4.
Hey everyone, we'll get back to the podcast in a second. But first, I have a new novel out, Holtman Arms. It follows Colvin Hall, an aspiring writer who decides to write a romance novel on a whim, sends it to a publisher, and it becomes a huge success. The only problem is, no one knows it's him because he writes under the pen name Mary Ballantyne. With all of the money and none of the fame, Colvin longs for the world to recognize his accomplishments. When he gets an opportunity to write a freelance article on a washed-up 90s pop star looking for a comeback, that recognition starts to come, but is it all he hoped for? It doesn't matter because he's getting it whether he likes it or not. Holtman Arms is the second in my author's cycle after A Girl and a Gun, and like that previous novel, it explores themes of success and accomplishment in the 21st century. You can buy it now through Amazon in paperback or on Kindle. The link is in the podcast description. As always, thanks for your support.
All right, we are back, and we are looking at Kickboxer 4, The Aggressor. So now we get Albert Pyun. He is back with the franchise after taking movie 3 off, and I gotta say, this one's probably my second favorite after the first one, and it's definitely Albert Pyun's vision. It's darker than it needed to be in spots, which we'll get into in a little bit. But Pyun brings his crew in. He's got George Moradian as his DP. Tony Ripparetti is doing the score, and I mean it's a really haunting score at points where I mean it's a darker movie, and Pyun and Sasha Mitchell come together to make something that I think is a really cohesive vision. And, it's a shame that we didn't see more Kickboxer films with these two. But, yeah, why don't we get in and do a quick synopsis here. So I don't know how far after movie 3 this takes place, even if it's meant to take place after movie 3. I don't even know if this is supposed to be along the same lines of the continuity with movie 3. It's almost like it takes place after movie 2. Anyway, Tong Po frames David Sloan, so we start the movie seeing him in prison. He is writing to his wife to let her know she needs to go hide somewhere because Tong Po is coming for her. He kidnaps her. He keeps her on his compound in Mexico for 2 years while David Sloan is stuck in prison until Albert Pyun mainstay Nicholas Guest shows up as a DE agent and busts him out, tells him he's got to get involved with a fighting tournament that Tong Po is hosting in Mexico. So that's the key. If Sloan can get into that tournament, he can find Tong Po, find his wife, bust Po, rescue his wife, and that's the key. So that's what he does. Now, of course, he's going under an alias because if Tong Po knows that it's him, he won't let him near the fight. The gig will be up, right? So Sloan kind of sneaks in there under an alias. He meets somebody he knows who was a kid that he had helped out with his old dojo. That's a buddy that he has there. There's a young lady who's trying to make it in the fight. Her character, or her name is Michelle the Moose Krasnu. That's her name, but she plays the character of Megan Lawrence. And so, yeah, so she's one of the fighters there. We have Tom Matthews, Albert Pyun mainstay, as one of Tong Po's henchman who's kind of running things while Tong Po sits in a chair and laughs at things, right, and occasionally beats people up. Kamel Krifa is the one who's playing Tong Po. According to the trivia, the reason why it's Kamel Krifa and not Michel Kisi is that Michel Kisi had ideas about things that he wanted to do with the film, and Pyun didn't want to deal with his input on it. So Pyun had an idea about where he wanted to take this movie. So it is darker, right? And I think, how dark did it need to be? I don't know that the wife needed to be held prisoner from Tong Po for 2 years. That seems to be a pretty rough deal to be stuck with him for 2 years. He's probably raping her, torturing her, all that kind of stuff. That's the sense that we get of it. I don't know that 2 years needed. A few weeks would have been bad enough for us, right? That we didn't need 2 years, but they wanted it to be dark. Sasha Mitchell plays the dark hero really well. I think that it could have been ridiculous. They could have played it off as it could have been silly. He's kind of mean mugging it with his sunglasses, and he's got his flannel shirts on and his jeans. Definitely no Zubaz pants from the previous film, right? This is not the lighthearted Zubaz movie that we had in part 3. This is definitely darker. We've got jeans and we've got flannels here and sunglasses. But Pyun shapes it in a way that it doesn't come off goofy, right? And Sasha Mitchell leans into who this character is. He kind of taps into a dark side, which, according to the trivia on Kickboxer 3, the director for that film said that director's name was Rick King. He said that Sasha Mitchell was aggressive and difficult to work with. That was what he said. Now, I don't know how true or false that is, but it's possible he's tapping into something there as well. But Pyun obviously liked him enough because he wanted to work with him again. So we get this darker hero. The setting is very like isolated and out there. There's definitely some ridiculousness. Tong Po just kind of kills people at will. It's like, he tells the fighters that the next round of fights is going to be to the death, and some people are like, okay, well, that's cool, we're out of here. And as they're leaving, he just kills them, he just shoots them all. That kind of stuff that you get in these kind of movies. But Pyun from a tournament movie standpoint, right? Like he likes tournament movies. I think he's a fan of Enter the Dragon, so he likes to sort of bring those in. And he brings in different elements when he does these tournament movies, but this was a chance for him to do that. He wanted to do a tournament movie here, and it shows. Again, I think comparing this one to the previous entry, right? This is definitely a much more of a kickboxer feel to it, to have a tournament where people are using different fighting styles, and there's David Sloan there just kicking ass. We do get some of the investigative piece as well, so it's like kind of like he's fighting during the day, and then at night he's sneaking around the compound trying to find where his where his wife might be being held. Eventually, of course, Po gets the drop on him. He gets captured, and then he's got to fight. And there's kind of this interesting way that they handled it, where it's just like he just throws all fighters at him. It's like anybody fight him, And then what happens is the young lady character kind of gets wise to who Tong Po is and convinces the other fighters to turn on him. And then we get the end fight with David Sloan. It's one of the best fights, I think, in the Kickboxer series. And when we get into the reboots, I think it's going to be really good to compare this end fight between Sasha Mitchell and Kamel Grifa, between Sloan and Po, to especially the second of the two reboots, where we get like a half hour of just people spitting Hawaiian punch out of their mouths for whatever. It's just like this way overdone thing. Whereas in this film we get a really, really good end fight scene where Pyun really takes advantage of the space. He's got this sort of banquet space that's supposed to be used for a huge end dinner that Tong Po's having, and they're fighting on the table. They're getting smashed around. Dishes are being smashed. There's one really nice scene where he kind of like sweeps him onto sweeps Tong Po straight down onto the table, which from a stunt person standpoint, it probably would have hurt. It looked really real there. But just the fact they were even able to have this fight on this very thin, elevated area of these long, thin tables looked really nice. And for a tournament movie where you're waiting for this fight to happen, for it to happen the way it does, I thought was really, really good. And then, of course, Tom Matthews' death is just absolutely hilarious. He's holding the wife hostage. Sasha Mitchell sneaks a knife from off the table and just throws it and embeds it right between his eyes. And Tom Matthews' reaction to it. Tom Matthews is, again, he's a Pyun mainstay for a reason, right? He's he's someone that Pyun works with on a regular basis and knows what Pyun's looking for in a movie, and Pyun can lean on him and just be like, hey, I need you to play this character, and he's there for it. And so, yeah, I was trying to think. Trying to think how many times we have tagged Tom Matthews on the site, and I think it's all. If it's not all Albert Pyun films, it's like all but like one or two Albert Pyun films with Tom Matthews. That's just how many films that he's done and how many Pyun films. Let's see. I mean, if I'm paging through it, so I'm in real time looking on my blog, how many times I've 12 times. Tom Matthews has been tagged 12 times, and I think they're all Albert Pyun films. And so, this is just an example of how he's good in these roles here. All of that really works. And so there's a sense when we get to the end of this movie that there was going to be more to come, because Tong Po doesn't die at the end of this movie, just like he doesn't in the other ones. But he kind of scurries away after Tom Matthews takes the wife. And so there's a sense that there could have been more after these. But I didn't really see much here, and I don't know what happened. I don't know why, for example, why we went in the direction of Part 5. I don't know what made things change with it. I don't know. I don't know like why we lose. Why Pyun doesn't keep making Kickboxer movies after this. I don't know if people thought that the darkness of it was too much. If they rather it wouldn't be so dark. Because I mean, again, it is dark. It's definitely a darker film. I know that before he passed, Pyun was looking to do more Kickboxer films with Sasha Mitchell. It looked like he may have also been tapping Olivier Gruner to do those movies, which again, Olivier Gruner, is trained in kickboxing, or kind of a similar type of martial art that they do in France. So, he would have been really good to be in that movie. I mean, I don't know what those movies were going to be like. If you go to the Letterboxd page for Sasha Mitchell, it lists those movies as, or lists that Kickboxer film. It's like something in Algiers or something like that. Again, it was a movie that never happened. It was kind of like in production before Albert Pyun got sick, and so they were never able to make it. I don't know what that means for a movie like that. Like, are there people that could potentially make it? So the Kickboxer Algiers is what the movie is called. And another one was City of Blood. That was another Kickboxer movie that was in development, and neither of them ended up happening. I don't know what happened after this, why he didn't make these movies sooner, why he didn't make the Kickboxer Algiers movie right after this one, or why it was time, or why he couldn't make the other one. They had the City of Blood idea that he had, like those didn't get made like in 97, 98 or whatever. It's kind of too bad, because I think it would have been cool to see like what he does here, what he would have done if he'd kind of taken this thing further. I don't know how much more Tong Po we could have done. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like at the end of this movie, it's like Tong Po's done as a baddie, right? Like he just gets completely savaged by Sasha Mitchell. He gets a few kicks in here or there, but for the most part, it's really not a fight, right? That Sasha Mitchell destroys him, and that's kind of what we would expect at this point, right? That Sasha Mitchell is driven, he's ready to go, and Tong Po is just, it's done. So I don't know that we need more Tong Po as a baddie, but either way, the dip that this thing takes when it goes from 4 to 5 is pretty big, but part of it is because we lose two of the big names, right? We lose Albert Pyun, we lose Sasha Mitchell. So yeah, I for me, I think it's almost like a what if after this one. But this was a good one. This one, I think at the time when I reviewed it, which I reviewed this one back in 2007. So it's been a while since I've touched these Kickboxer films. At the time, I was like, this is fantastic, and I think I first saw it on Spike, but then of course I saw it again. I saw it first on Spike, and then I said FX on my site. Maybe it was FX, because it's interesting at that time, right? If you think of it kind of like the early mid 2000s, you had these cable channels like FX, you had Spike, USA at that time USA was a lot of Dolphin and Seagal flicks, but you never knew like when some of these direct to video movies, what stations would have them, and so. Yeah, I think I saw it on there originally, but I was just I was a huge fan right away. One of the jokes that I made in that review, and I think it's something to bring up again, is that you know a movie is good when people don't do a good job playing dead, right? So one scene, right, we have Tong Po, right, is shows they have this undercover agent and then a woman that he killed, right? And if you watch the woman, you can see her breathing, right? She doesn't, she. And I don't know if you expect her to hold her breath or whatever, but she doesn't really look that dead. I really wasn't sure she was dead until they really made it explicit that, like, hey, she died. I think Tong Po says she died because of you to the other kid who was there that originally trained in Sasha Mitchell's dojo there. So I don't know. Yeah, that was kind of a fun. I mean, there was some fun stuff like that in the movie as well, right? I mean, there's a really great bar fight scene where the young woman who Sasha Mitchell kind of befriends in the tournament there, she gets attacked by some guys at a bar, and Sasha Mitchell shows up at the bar, kind of like, what are you doing attacking her, and just, goes in on these guys. And it's just like this kind of all-out thing. But the way Pyun does it, I mean, there's a lot of comedy in the shots. I mean, there's some guys that just look goofy when they're getting hit. I mean, people just getting thrown through windows. But it also is a really well choreographed fight scene there too. And again, it's the kind of thing that we don't really see. We see it in part 1, but we hadn't really seen it since. 2 doesn't have enough of it, and definitely not in part 3. So to bring it back here and get some really, really well choreographed fight scenes, again, it's the kind of thing I think other than we get some really good choreographed fight scenes in part 5. So when we get into that, we'll talk about that. And I think the second of the 2 reboots, there's a really nice scene where Musi's in the prison, and he has kind of like a one-shot fight scene there that he does in the prison that's really good. But really beyond that, there isn't a lot that we get beyond some of the really great scenes here in this one. So that's another area of this that works really well. So yeah, I think this one here, and again, it's available on Tubi. I mean, I think it's worth it to see the other ones before it. I don't know how much 4 and 3 are connected. This is definitely connected with part 2, that's for sure. So it is good to watch 1, 2, and then 4. And I don't know. It's something it would have been nice to know, kind of, and I don't know, maybe. It was a question I should have asked Pyun way back when I would communicate with him about movies and stuff when he was making films like Road to Hell, and reaching out to me to see what I thought of those movies and having me review them on the site. If I should have asked him, like, hey, did you ever want to get back and just kind of right the wrong, or not right the wrongs, but do more Kickboxer? Like, what happened after part 4 that made you not go back to that series? It would have been interesting to find out, like, why it was so long. And when we get into part 5 here in a little bit, we'll be talking about kind of why there was a gap, after part 5, that, almost 20 years before, or more than 20 years, slightly more than 20 years before we get to those reboots. So it'll be interesting to kind of explore that a little bit when we talk about part 5 here in a bit. One other quick thing I do want to mention. So again, going back to the IMDb page, we did get, it wasn't movies that aired in April 2001 on WSBK UPN 38. It was movies that aired in July 1st through the 29th, 2001, UPN WSBK. So I would have been home from college at that point. So I would have been, I graduated in 02. That was my 5th year. I did a 5th year because I switched majors. So it was the end of my 4th year. That would have been the summer between my 4th and 5th years at UMaine, but I would have been home for that. And I don't know, I'm trying to think if I saw any of these that they mentioned here, but some good ones again. We've got the first and second Lady Dragon films that were on here. So you got to love those, right? Directed by David Worth. Of course, Cynthia Rothrock in those. Richard Norton in the first one, Drago in the second one. Those are movies that, I've covered on the site here. I want to say, I don't know if I did both Lady Dragons with John from After Movie Diner on a recent one. But I know, I think we might have. Those might have been the 2 that I covered with him. I don't remember if it was Lady Dragons, though, or it might have been Rage and Honors that I did with him. So it might not have been the Lady Dragons. But either way, those were on there. Of course, as we just talked about, Kickboxer 4 was on here. And then, we get into Danger Zone. I don't know if you remember Danger Zone. One that I could probably review for the site. Alan Eastman film that had Billy Zane, Robert Downey Jr., Kerry Tagawa. I got to think, like, I haven't reviewed that one. I haven't, it's one that I could probably use for the site. But let me see if any of our our friends of, and this one's on Freevee, so it's one that I could definitely check out on the site. But I was gonna say, Comeuppance had to do it. Actually, it's what I would have called an exacta movie or superfecta movie. So Bulletproof has covered it. Matt Spector at Bulletproof covered it. Ty and Brett from Comeuppance have covered it, and then Mitch, the Video Vacuum, have covered it. So I really need to get on the train for that one. I haven't seen that one, but aired in July of 2001 on WSBK. So that was another great one there. In terms of other stuff there, not much else. I mean, Leprechaun 4, of course, you got to have Leprechaun 4 on there. And then there was a movie called Stalking Laura that I may have actually seen on UPN during that window, because that's one that would probably kind of fit in that time frame. It's got Richard Thomas, right, from the Waltons, who plays a stalker who's stalking Brooke Shields. And he is just absolutely chilling as the bad guy there. I mean, I think, 1993, it would have been far enough from the Waltons, but I think there was probably a sense of like, I don't want to just be John Boy anymore, so he's going to play this guy who, it was based on a real story. A guy who was stalking a woman who's, the woman who's played by Brooke Shields. I guess it happened in the 80s, but this was a really thing, and he goes on. I don't know if I call it, compared to the mass shootings that we have nowadays here in the U.S., which is horrible to think like, our mass shootings just got a lot, much more robust. But I think he killed like 3 people at the office. Like he just, kind of went off and did that. But yeah, I might have seen that one there on UPN 38 when it aired at that time. So interesting to see that one listed there. But yeah, Kickboxer 4. If you were watching WSBK UPN 38, if you weren't watching Shasta McNasty or whatever else, Dilbert. I think I want to say Dilbert was on like 2001. I can't remember. The fact that we had to have a Dilbert cartoon. UPN they were definitely like struggling to get content at that time, and eventually, right? I don't know how much longer they lasted before they merged with so it would have been. It's called the CW now, but I think it was. I can't remember what it was called. Was it the WB? I think it was called the WB at that time. There's these, we had these new stations, these new channels out. And so, yeah, UPN 38, they had to figure out what to air, but we got some Kickboxer 4 at that time as well. So, definitely really great stuff there. I think that's kind of everything for Kickboxer 4. So again, I think it's important. I'm a big Albert Pyun fan. Even though I did one of my reviews refer to him as a car movie director or car commercial director. So and he was very gracious in not saying like don't ever talk about my movies again, but actually came back and said it was Mean Guns that I called him that, and he actually came back to me after seeing some other reviews and said, hey, could you maybe could you maybe give Mean Guns another try? Because, I still think you might like it. It's funny. I think there are a lot of people that have Mean Guns as like one of their favorites, and I would put something like a Kickboxer 4 above Mean Guns in terms of my favorite Albert Pyun film. So that probably gives you a sense that my taste is a little different than what people look for. But I think this is a good one. Again, I don't know that you can just watch it by itself, because I think he does really build into that context from movies 1 and 2. He even has stock footage from the first movie, which that means I don't think I have Van Damme tagged in Kickboxer 4. I probably should tag Van Damme for that, which I don't know what that does to his tag count, but it is technically a movie that he was in, because to give you a sense, I gave Albert Pyun a tag when his footage was used in Dollman versus Demonic Toys. So he didn't direct that movie, but his footage from Dollman was used in it, and I gave him a tag for that. So I should give Van Damme a tag for Kickboxer 4, and I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. It's possible the reason why I didn't was because I probably didn't watch it that soon after my review, and I probably forgot that he was in it. That's something that I did from time to time back then, especially in that 07 period. I would just review movies without having seen them in years, and so that's probably what happened. I probably forgot that Van Damme was in that, but he probably should get a tag for that, which if he did get a tag for that would put him at 34 movies on the site, which that's always interesting between him and Van Damme and Seagal. He'd still be a little bit behind Seagal, but that question of him getting into the 40 club, I don't know if that's happening, but either way, we probably have to fix that up. But yeah, that's pretty much it for part 4. So I think what we'll do is we'll take another break here, and then we will get into number 5, looking at Kickboxer 5, or I think it's Redemption Kickboxer 5 is actually how the title is. But either way, we'll take a break and we'll get into that one here in just a second.
Hey, it's Matt from the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur here. Thanks again for listening to the DTVC podcast. Before we jump in, I wanted to quickly let you know that my new novel, A Girl and a Gun, is available on Amazon now, both on Kindle and paperback. It follows Justin, a successful writer whose past as a scriptwriter for a fetish porn site comes back to haunt him and threatens to derail his career. As he's picking up the pieces, he gets an opportunity to make a movie called A Girl and a Gun with a rom-com star. Justin may have bitten off more than he can chew, though, because she's notoriously difficult to work with. If you're interested, you can find the link on our webpage, along with the link to my first novel, Chad in Accounting. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I thank you for the support. Now, on to the podcast.
All right, we are back, and we are going to wrap up here by looking at Redemption, Kickboxer 5. But before we do that, a couple corrections from the previous segment. One, in terms of those Cynthia Rothrock episodes, so last September, I had John Cross from After Movie Diner on. We talked about Rage and Honor 1 and 2, so it wasn't Lady Dragon 1 and 2, it was Rage and Honor 1 and 2. And then the week before that, I had Tom Joliffe, a screenwriter, on, and we talked about China O'Brien and Lady Dragon. So that was when Lady Dragon was covered, was actually in the episode 107. So if you want to go back in the archives and check those out, it's episodes 107 and 108. It was around the time that we were getting Cynthia Rothrock into the 40 Club. So I had them on separate episodes, but kind of looking at some Cynthia Rothrock films. I want to say that I recorded them in late August, because I kind of feel like it was, I always take the week off for my anniversary. So my wife and I, we got married August 24th. And so I always take that week off from work. And I think I recorded those episodes during that period of time and then just published them at that time. So I kind of remember that. So anyway, so just that correction there. Another quick correction is just in terms of Kickboxer for the Aggressor. Michelle Krasnu, her nickname was Mouse, not Moose. So I said I'm getting them mixed up already as we're talking, but it's Michelle Mouse Krasnu, not Michelle Moose Krasnu. I think Moose, I got that in my head from You Can't Do That on Television. If you remember, Moose was on You Can't Do That on Television. So old show that was on Nickelodeon. It was an old Canadian show. I believe, like if you remember, Alanis Morissette had her first appearance, I believe, on that show. But I always remember Alistair. He was my favorite. They'd be like, they'd all be like in these lockers and be like, "Hey, Alistair," and he'd come out and he'd say something, or whatever, So anyway, that's probably where I got Moose instead of Mouse, but it was Mouse was the name. But get those things out of the way there. Just do a couple corrections, and then why don't we wrap up here? But we're talking about Redemption Kickboxer 5. So not just plain old Kickboxer 5, but it's the Redemption. And interesting thing about this one, right, is that we get Mark Dacascos now in the lead. He's taking over for Sasha Mitchell. Our baddie, so we have gone away from Tong Po as a baddie. We have James Ryan as the baddie now. So of course, if you know James Ryan, I mean, again, I bring him up as Space Mutiny just because that's one of the first things I remember him in. But of course, probably the big ones for him, he's done a lot of 80s late 80s and early 90s bad action. Probably his best known after Space. Well, so Space Mutiny, I shouldn't say Space Mutiny is one he's best known for, right? Because it's one that MST3K people know him for. But I would say probably his two biggest ones, right, would be Karate Killer and Kill and Kill Again, right? Those are his probably his big claim to fame. But a lot of stuff that he would do that was shot in South Africa in the late 80s, early 90s. Another great one that he's in is Codename Vengeance, a Robert Ginty, Shannon Tweed film, which I've seen and I haven't reviewed it on the site, which I thought I had, but it looks like I haven't yet. So got to get to that one soon. But anyway, so he's the baddie, right? And Mark Dacascos is our good guy. So essentially, as we're going to try to wrap this into the canon of the film, and I don't know if we have a Kickboxer canon. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the idea is that David Sloan has been murdered by James Ryan and his kickboxing syndicate that he's trying to create. So James Ryan is a disgraced former kickboxing champ named Nagal, and he, in his revenge, he's essentially going around and trying to get all of the kickboxers into his own new kickboxing syndicate, and anybody who won't join his new kickboxing syndicate, he kills them. So that's pretty much it. And so he needs to get David Sloan, right? David Sloan says no, so he's dead. And so Mark Dacascos plays Matt Reeves, who's a friend of David Sloan. He's very upset to hear about this news that his friend has been murdered. And then he has another friend who's a guy who's like kind of up and comer in the kickboxing world, who's looking to go for the belt. His character's name is Johnny Styles. The actor's name is Denny Pierce. So he goes to see him fight, and after the fight, representatives from James Ryan from Nagal show up with the sort of the offer you can't refuse, right? And like the kid reads the contract and he's like, hey, this guy owns everything, right? He's like, I have to ask permission if I need to go to the bathroom, essentially is what he's saying. And they laugh about it, and then it's like, well, okay, you don't want to do it, now we're going to beat the crap out of you for not signing the contract. Dacascos shows up because his a guy who works at his gym gets wind that that David Sloan was killed after meeting with the same people that Johnny Styles is going to be meeting with. He shows up. He doesn't show up in time to save his friend, but he shows up in time to give these guys a bit of a beating. So James Ryan wants Matt Reeves taken care of somehow. So what they do is they plan to bust a guy out of jail who had fought with them before. So played by Jeff Mead. The character's name is Paul Croft. But he's known as a vicious fighter from South Africa. The idea is that they bust him out of jail, and if they bust him out of jail and he kills Matt Reeves, they'll fly him back to South Africa for that. So Paul Croft decides, you know what, I'm not going to kill Matt Reeves because I could use him to kind of get my revenge on this Nagal guy, or at the very least, I can go back and get the revenge myself. And I think that's more of what his plan is, to get the revenge himself. But it just happens that Matt Reeves, when he finds out that they're trying to kill him, he's like, hey, I'm going to go out to South Africa and take down this Nagal guy, as well. They just happen to be sitting next to each other on the plane, which I guess kind of makes sense, right? 2 last-minute tickets to Joburg. You probably, put them together on the seat there, but put them together on the plane there, so they share a seat. But anyway, they start talking and realize, hey, maybe they should help each other. And when they get to the airport, there's a big airport chase and fight scene. They realize, yes, we got to team up, and they team up to take down this Nagal guy. That's the extent of it. And in between, there's a lot of different fights and chases and things like that to kind of get us there. So I think initially I didn't like this because it was kind of goofy, the idea that you had Dacascos in the role, because Dacascos isn't a kickboxer. And I think, though, watching it again, the fight scenes are pretty well choreographed. There's a lot of them. We get a bunch of them, kind of interspersed throughout the film. So the film doesn't have a lot of draggy moments. It's kind of like, every so often we get into a fight. I mean, I say it doesn't have a lot of draggy moments, but it does kind of get away from itself a little bit. There's a point where the two of them get thrown in jail. They got to figure out how to get out of jail, and that's kind of weighs the film down a bit. I don't know how much we needed that kind of stuff happening. So it does meander a bit in parts. Again, I don't think it's as solid a film as 4. I don't think it's as good as 2 either. I think, if I'm looking at the hierarchy, but I think on a second rewatch, I do like it a little bit better than 3. Because again, I like Dacascos has some really great fight scenes. Jeff Mead as his partner has some great fight snes. James Ryan, right? Of course, he's an accomplished martial artist himself. Has some good fight scenes. He has one with Gavin Hood. So I don't know if you know Gavin Hood. Directed a film called Sauteed, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. That it was either nominated or won Best Foreign Language Picture. So it was a really great movie. I really loved it. And I think I had seen that he had directed something that I had reviewed before, and I was like, wow, that's Gavin Hood. What's he doing in that? So I also remember he directed is it X-Men Origins Wolverine, I think, is the one that he directed. It was one of those. It's one that was kind of, I think it was kind of panned a little bit. It was let's see here. Yeah, it was X-Men Origins Wolverine. Yeah, he directed it, which I don't know that it was his fault that that movie was as bad as it was. Right, I don't think as a director, he didn't make the decision, right, for the whole Deadpool piece, right, or any of that kind of stuff. So but he also directed Ender's Game, a few of those. But he plays a German champion who gets beaten up by and killed by James Ryan. So kind of an interesting little side note there. But also, I kind of like that James Ryan was playing he was getting to flex his martial arts a little bit, and it was a good fight scene that he has with Dacascos. So I think that's kind of a cool piece there. So then what happens, right, of course, is that this movie is it for roughly 20 years, right? We don't get another Kickboxer film until the reboots happen in 2016. So we get the one reboot in 2016, another one in 2018. And I honestly don't know if maybe this film was the one that kills the franchise, right? Because it does kind of get a little bit out there. One, we're killing David Sloan off. I don't know why we needed to kill David Sloan off, right? Just because if they couldn't use Sasha Mitchell, he didn't want to be in the movie or whatever, they could have done something else with it. But I think that's part of it. And this is sort of pre-Fast and Furious, right, where anybody who's killed comes back to life somehow, right? Or it's kind of what happens in a lot of blockbusters now. People get killed off and they just come back, right? It just seems to be what happens all the time. So there, I don't know if that was part of it. They felt like this kind of deadened it, or people felt like after number 5 that there just wasn't an appetite for more Kickboxer. I don't know, but whatever it was, like this movie ends it for 20 years. Like there isn't another Kickboxer. Nobody even touches the franchise again for another 20 years. So really interesting piece there. The other thing that's interesting about this is that I believe this is the only one in the franchise that's directed by a woman. The woman's name is Christine Peterson is the director of this, and so that's another interesting tidbit about this. She's done some other stuff that you might recognize. She did a Silk Stockings episode. She did Critters 3. So she's done some stuff that you might recognize out there. She hasn't directed anything since '97. So there's that piece there. But still the fact that we do get a woman directing one of these, I think is really cool. She was a second unit director, I think, for Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So that might have been another piece that people knew her from. So it's an interesting bit there, but I don't know. I guess, one of the things I think is interesting about this movie is that there is a sense that this film has to fit some sort of Kickboxer canon. And that's a huge thing with movies nowadays, right? Everything's got to fit into a canon. I think the most like shark jumping conversation that I saw about that was when Mindy Kaling's Velma TV show was being announced on Twitter, and people were freaking out because I think the character, one, she's Southeast Asian, and two, she was supposed to be gay, right? She was lesbian, and people were saying like, well, where is it in the Scooby-Doo canon that Velma's gay? And it's like, what? What's Scooby-Doo canon? Like, there's no Scooby-Doo canon. Like, what are people talking about? But, like, younger people, like, they need a canon. Like, there's a whole thing about canon. I saw an article. I didn't read the article. I just happened to see, like, a thing about it where somebody was asking a director, like, oh, is it okay to include deleted scenes in a movie even if it changes the canon? And it's like, the what? The canon? Like, what, And this movie, I think, kind of speaks a little bit to it in the sense that, like, okay, we get part 2, right? Part 2, Kickboxer 2, feels like it's got to somehow build off the story from part 1, and the way that they do it without having the Sloan brothers in it is to kill them off and create a third Sloan brother, right? And so then that's how we work through 2, 3, and 4 is we've got this new Sloan brother, David Sloan, played by Sasha Mitchell. And then when they can't get him for part 5 or whatever happens with part 5, he has to be killed off, right, in order to have Dacascos has to play his friend. And again, I don't know, like, is that a canon thing? Like, do we have to do we have to kill him off? Did we have to have somebody, do we have to have it fit in a narrative or something like that? And that's another piece of it now, right, too, is that one, there's a whole canon thing, but the other piece is that you have these DTV sequels that have nothing to do with the previous movie. And that's not even necessarily a new thing, right? We see it new thing, like, for example, Hard Target 2, right? Hard Target 2 has nothing to do with the first Hard Target. It's just slap Hard Target on there, right? Welcome to Sudden Death has nothing to do with the movie Sudden Death. You just slap the Sudden Death name on it, and there you go. But even with the Blood Fist movies, right? You think of the Blood Fist movies that were happening around the same time. Roger Corman was just making an action movie with Don the Dragon Wilson and slapping the Blood Fist title on it. They had nothing to do with the previous movies. I think it's like 1, 2, and 3 are connected, and then after that, all bets are off. It's just all, Blood Fist, whatever. Just slap the title Blood Fist on it. And so it's interesting that these movies didn't want to do that, right? That they wanted some sort of connection between the previous entries, and they had to kind of shoehorn these connections in. I don't know that we necessarily needed it, but if we were going to have these connections, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think of like what could have been done further with this story if they were going to do it. I mean, one idea, like one thing that comes to mind, right? Again, I talked about a syndicated TV series, like a Kickboxer syndicated TV series, which it is kind of surprising that there was never a Kickboxer syndicated TV series. Again, I really think that this number 5 here kills the series so much that they're just like, we can't do anything with this anymore. I think that I don't know if that's what the mindset is, but in the 90s, they were making syndicated TV series about everything, and so it would have been interesting to see, like, okay, let's change this. And I don't know what it would have been. I don't know what a Kickboxer series would have been. Would it have just been like him traveling around the country and training and having fights? Maybe, I mean, again, Kickboxer 3 makes a really good episode of a Kickboxer TV series. So there's that part of it there. I was thinking about the Highlander TV series and how that really doesn't fit the movies, but they found a way to make I don't know if they even found a way to make them fit the movies. Like you have the series where you do get Connor McLeod in there with Duncan McLeod, so you get Lambert's character. And then they made the movie together, with the two of them, that I think it was kind of supposed to. I think it was kind of almost to be like part one isn't like the fight scene at the end of part one. They kind of getting into more modern terminology, retcon maybe that it's not the final fight or something. I don't know. But they didn't really care, right, necessarily, that it wasn't all fitting from a canon standpoint, right? There was, though, they kind of created the Highlander canon, you say, as they went. I mean, one of the interesting things, right, was you had the Watchers, and then you had the offshoot of the Watchers who killed Immortals. And they didn't really know, they didn't really create that. They didn't kind of come up with that idea ahead of time. It was when one of the main actors who was playing an immortal who lived in a monastery, so he couldn't be killed by another immortal. He died in real life of brain cancer. They had to figure out what to do there, so they just created that idea of Watchers and offshoot of Watchers that killed immortals and used that in on the show. And so, I mean, that's a lot of times how stories are developed and how they work, and then people look at this as like, oh, this is canon now. This is like this is how it's got to be. This is how we need to use this. And I don't know if Kickboxer TV series. It's just like, maybe David Sloan didn't die. We're just going to bring Sasha Mitchell back and just do this series of 13 episodes, seasons or whatever. I don't know. I guess. Kind of getting back to it, I don't know that like a Kickboxer TV series or further sequels didn't happen because they killed David Sloan off. Even though, again, they really want to make these movies all fit together. I think it's really just because this movie just wasn't really well received, and they felt like, okay, we've gotten as much blood out of the stone as we can, and that's it. And it took 20 years before they came back and tried to reboot it. It's probably what happened more than anything. But it is interesting that it was 20 years, that nobody for example, in the early 2000s thought, hey, what could we do with Kickboxer? Could we try something with this? Again, like Albert Pyun didn't come back to it in the early 2000s and say, hey, maybe we could do something along the lines of a Kickboxer that, follows Kickboxer 5, right? That maybe we don't do Kickboxer, follows Kickboxer 4, and maybe we skip 5 or something like that. I don't know. Nobody really came back to want to do this again until, and I don't know what made Albert Pyun decide later that he wanted to redo these movies with Sasha Mitchell, do the Kickboxer Algiers or something like that. I don't know what made him decide then that he wanted to get back into it and not earlier. Again, if there was a sense that nobody wanted to touch Kickboxer after part 5, I don't know. Again, Mark Dacascos in this movie is fantastic. He's as electric as he always is as a fighter. And so this movie, if it works or doesn't work, has nothing to do with him, right? He's still fantastic in this. And I think James Wright is great as bad. I mean, the story itself is just kind of all over the place, and that's probably the thing that kills this, but I don't think it should take away from the great martial arts that we get from Mark Dacascos in this. And I think, when I look at his movies on our site, there's definitely ones like Drive that are just complete, just all out great Dacascos. But you get ones like this, or Double Dragon's another one we can bring to mind, where his martial arts is still fantastic, but the movie itself isn't great. And I think that's, unfortunately, the reality for Dacascos is that he didn't always get the parts that he should have gotten. But his martial arts skills are just electric, and you get that here. Comparing him to Sasha Mitchell, they're two different animals, right? And that's maybe where it would have been great if we'd had a 6th movie where the two of them could have teamed up and done some stuff together, because I think it would really been cool to see there are two different styles working against each other, or not against each other, but working, opposite each other. I think, fighting other baddies together. That could have been a really good movie to kind of see that happen, but of course it never did happen. I mean, it could still happen now. They could make it now, but I think Dacascos would be above. I would say his quality of films that he does, he probably wouldn't do a low budget reboot of that. But I don't know. It could be interesting to see. I mean, Art Camacho is someone who works with Sasha Mitchell in addition to Albert Pyun, and maybe Art Camacho is the person to take up the Kickboxer mantle and make some more of these movies. And again, we're going to be still doing those reboots soon. So I'm making it sound like this is done at 5. It's, there is a whole reboot that happens. And that reboot, they're looking to make a third reboot movie, even though the second one wasn't really that well received, which it shouldn't have been. It was way too long. It was bloated. We'll get into that more of that in 2 weeks when I cover that one. But, there felt like there's more meat on the bone after this here. But that's me watching these all together all at once and saying, like, yeah, there's some more meat on the bone. I think, the me who watched this, which I think I must have seen this maybe on Spike or FX when I first saw it, but also, like mid-90s me watching this, if I had watched it in the mid-90s, I would have thought, okay, this is enough Kickboxer, right? We've done enough. We don't need any more Kickboxers. Now looking at it, though, I'm like, they could have done some more. And I think... Yeah, I think, early 2000s, it's amazing nobody came back to it and said, we could make some more, do something else with this. And it took Van Damme coming back to it, in the mid 2010s when they decided to reboot it then. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say it's a bad ending to the series here to have number 5. I mean, I think number 4 was the clean ending. If we weren't going to make anything after 5, 4 should have been it, right? 4 should have been the last film in the series because it really does put a button on things. I mean, Tong Po escapes, it leaves the door open for another film, but really, that kind of should have been it. If they're going to make Kickboxer 5, which again, I don't hate this movie. I think it is a fun movie, and I think, again, the martial arts in it are solid. If you're going to make a 5, this one shouldn't have been the last movie. There should have been more that came after this, I think. And that's maybe where it's a little unfulfilling, is that, that they could have done some more here. It would have been nice to see Mitchell and Dacascos pair up. I think that could have been a cool pairing there. But, last week we never got that. So, that's kind of it. We're going to leave Kickboxer for 20 years now after this. We're going to be done with it for a bit. And, but I said we're in real life, right, at 20 years. In 2 weeks, I'll be coming back, of course, to cover the reboots. I'm not going to wait 20 years. I'd be surprised if I'm around here in 20 years still doing this in my 60s. But you never know. I mean, I didn't think I would be here 15 years after starting the blog. And there was that hiatus in the middle there. But the fact that I am still kicking out reviews, I think, is a good sign. So who knows? Maybe we'll get there. And I guess we want to, before we wrap up, we got to kind of play the game that we've been playing throughout this episode of what aired on UPN 38. In this case, it was movies that aired on UPN 38 between June 2nd and 30th of 2001. So again, I'm home from college. It's still in that same window, right? So we had April for part 3. We had July for part 4. Now we've got June of 2001, and WSBK. So somebody is really doing cataloging these here and, putting these all in here. So in terms of movies, we had Cold Blooded, a movie with Jason Priestley and Robert Loggia from 95, an action comedy. I haven't seen that one, but that's probably a good one we could review on the site. Of course, Kickboxer 5, right? The Redemption. That's right near the top of list of movies there. Pinocchio's Revenge, one that I could probably do on the site. I think that was Pinocchio's Revenge, and also Pumpkinhead 2 is also listed on here. Those are 2 movies that I think I'd intended to review on the site, but then, early on in the site when I was getting more traction with the action films than the horror films, horror started to take a back seat, and so that's I think that's why those 2 movies never ended up on the site. But a couple of great ones there. Unlawful Passage. I don't know if you remember this one. Lee Horsley, who may remember from Matt Houston. Matt Houston was a little bit before my time. Magnum P.I. stayed on the air long enough, but Matt Houston was kind of similar around that same time, but it was a little bit before my time. But if you're a little bit older, you probably remember Lee Horsley as Matt Houston. Of course, Lee Horsley, of course, also Sword of the Sorcerer, right? Albert Pyun film. But also William Zabka was in that one. But erotic thriller, right? About a rich couple who hires a sailboat. Unbeknownst to them, he's a drug smuggler. I remember that. I don't know if I watched it on UPN, but I might have on WSBK. Midnight Ride was on that time. So remember that one, right? Mark Hamill, Michael Dudikoff, Robert Mitchum. That's one we reviewed on the site, of course. We've done pretty much all of the Michael Dudikoff, at least the ones from that period. So that one was on there as well. You of course, gotta love Dudikoff and Mark Hamill. And I think, as I'm paging down here, I think there was another Mark Hamill. Well, actually, before we get to that other Mark, Time Runner from Mark Hamill was also aired during that time. So if you remember that one with Brian James as well and Radon Chong, I think I reviewed that one for the site. But then also, interestingly enough, Nemesis, the Albert Pyun film with Olivia Gruner and Tim Thomerson, Kerry Tagawa. That one aired, which I cannot believe that one was on UPN at that time. Who knows, if I could have potentially have seen it when it was there. But that's one that I remember more as a video store and kind of more like a HBO cable kind of thing. So I don't remember it being on sort of TV like that. But interesting enough that was Nemesis was on then. So yeah, so kind of a look back at 2001, which I cannot believe how long ago that was. 2001 is 23 years ago now, and so somebody has cataloged movies that aired on WSBK TV 38 in Boston during that time. So a little blast from the past. So one of my favorite things as I'm wrapping up here about WSBK 38 when I was growing up, they used to do on New Year's Eve a marathon of Three Stooges movies. So I used to watch that with my dad. That was always kind of a fun thing. I remember when I got to be a little bit too old for that, when I got started hanging out and doing things, there's a part of me that thinks that he kind of felt bad that I wasn't doing it, but actually, if I remember right, it was probably more like he was able to go drink with his buddies as well. So maybe it was kind of one of the things where he enjoyed watching that with me, but I think he was happy that I was going out to do things so he could go out and drink with his buddies or whatever. But because I don't remember him being that disappointed that I was like too old to stay home and watch it. But that was always a fun New Year's Eve thing to watch the WSBK TV 38 Three Stooges marathon. But anyway, so we'll wrap this up. So that is movies 3, 4, and 5 in the Kickboxer series. And again, in 2 weeks, we're going to wrap this up by looking at the 2 reboots that came in 2016 and 2018. So we'll have a lot to cover there. Couple of slides. I think the second one in particular is going to be a little bit of a rough sit for me, but anyway, we'll get into those. We'll do that. But yeah, as I'm wrapping up, we'll do some quick plugs here. So again, the novels. Holtman Arms is the most recent one. You've probably already heard the commercial during this episode. Yeah, I mean, definitely, you still get that one on Amazon, paperback, Kindle. I think, if I sold enough, it's hard to say. Like I was going to say, like if I sold enough, I wouldn't put the commercial on anymore if people were sick of hearing the commercial. But actually, the commercial, right? If people were buying it, I'd be like, oh, the commercial's working, and I'd keep playing it. So yeah, so that's more counterintuitive. But I think one thing at Don's House in the Mountain Out will probably stop running that ad, but I don't know. But yeah, so there's Holtman Arms, Girl and a Gun, and then Chad and Accounting. So those are the 3 novels that I have out. So definitely pick up those at some point. Don's House in the Mountain, I'm shooting for probably October release for that now. Again, I did a read through of it, saw some errors in there, saw some issues in there. Thought probably not going to be I think I want to give it one more try, one more read through just to make sure everything's okay there. But yeah, but we'll keep an eye out for that. I'll keep you posted, of course, on that as well. But yeah, that is everything. So thank you all for listening. And we will talk soon. Bye, everyone.